The refractive faces of the glass, you see, they create a full wavelength dispersal. So if you look inside it, you can see
every possible color.
Ron Howard was born in Duncan, Oklahoma, with both of his parents being actors. Thanks to that, he actually made his acting debut on stage at 18 months old and made his screen debut at age 4. At a young age, he had a memorable role in the film The Music Man, and then became a familiar face to millions of Americans as Opie on The Andy Griffith Show. The popular program ran for several years on primetime TV and is still in continuous syndication around the United States of America. Because of his childhood success, he was given the opportunity in his late teens to join the cast of another long-running sitcom, playing the leading role of Richie Cunningham on Happy Days. At the same time, he played a leading role in the hit film American Graffiti, directed by George Lucas, and in John Wayne's last film, The Shootist. Howard received excellent reviews for these performances, but by then he was determined to transition into a film director. In the beginning, the young actor directed several episodes of Happy Days, but couldn't find a major studio willing to entrust a feature film to a 23-year-old novice, however well known. At last, Howard struck an unusual deal with independent producer Roger Corman, who offered Howard to direct a film on the condition that he would act in it too. Ron Howard accepted to do it for almost no pay for the opportunity to direct. The surprising success of Grand Theft Auto allowed Howard to break into mainstream filmmaking, and this led to a career that has spanned over 4 decades and is still going strong with many projects in the works. With that being said, this is the 3rd video in my Ron Howard retrospective, looking back at Howard's career throughout the decades. This video will focus on his career throughout the 2000s until current times. So without any further ado, Ron Howard in modern day cinema. The 2000s started with a bang, with Howard making the movie How the Grinch Stole Christmas, which is based on Dr. Seuss's 1957 book of the same name. Actually, this was the first Dr. Seuss book to be adapted into a full-length feature film because before his death in 1991, Dr. Seuss had refused offers to sell the film rights to his books. However, his widow, Audrey Gazel, agreed to several merchandising deals, including clothing lines, accessories, and CDs. In July 1998, Gazel's agent announced via letter she would auction the film rights of How the Grinch Stole Christmas. At the time, Howard was developing a film adaptation of The Sea Wolf, and despite being an avid fan of the animated special, he did not express interest in Grinch, but Grazer talked Howard into traveling to Gazel's residence for the pitch meeting, which pretty much made him want to direct the film. In this adaptation of the film, we follow the Grinch, who was rejected by the Who's as a child, and as a result has been living in spiteful seclusion for most of his life. Because of this, he has always hated the citizens of Whoville, and even more the fact that they are enamored with Christmas. Trying to make their lives more miserable, the reclusive Green Grinch decides to ruin Christmas for the cheery citizens of Whoville. Reluctantly joined by his hapless dog, Max, the Grinch comes down from his mountaintop home and sneaks into town to swipe everything holiday-related from the Who's. However, the bitter Grump finds a hitch in his plans when he encounters the endearing Cindy Lou Who. Much of the Whoville set was constructed on the backlot of Universal Studios behind the Bates Motel set from Psycho. Rick Baker was hired to design and create the film's prosthetic makeup for Carrie and the rest of the cast. The application of the makeup took up to 8.5 hours, with a total of 92 days in the Grinch makeup. Even though a lot of work was put in making this movie, the film earned mixed reviews from critics but still managed to spend 4 weeks as the #1 film in the United States, grossing $345 million worldwide, and was the 6th highest grossing film of 2000. In 2001, Howard's follow-up film was the biographical drama film A Beautiful Mind, starring Russell Crowe as the American mathematician John Nash, who struggled with paranoid schizophrenia. The movie came into production after producer Brian Grazer first read an excerpt of Sylvia Nasar's book A Beautiful Mind in Vanity Fair magazine. He immediately purchased the rights to the film. He eventually brought the project to director Ron Howard, who had scheduling conflicts and was forced to pass. Grazer later said that many A-list directors were calling with their point of view on the project, so Grazer simply went back to Ron Howard and worked with his schedule in order to make it work with him as a director. In this film, we follow John Nash, who goes through a myriad of highs and lows from his time as a mathematics student in graduate school at Princeton in the late 1940s to his Nobel Prize win for economics in 1994. A brilliant but somewhat arrogant and antisocial man, Nash preferred to spend his time with his thoughts, which were primarily of seeing mathematical formulae associated with everyday occurrences than with people. Two people he did make a connection with were Charles, his roommate at Princeton, and Alicia Lard, one of his students when he was teaching at MIT in the early 1950s. He and Alicia eventually marry. As time goes on, Nash lives more and more with himself, which causes major problems in his life, but Alicia stands by her husband to his redemption to the Nobel Prize win. Nash learns that his graduate school colleagues, with whom he had a cordial but somewhat distant relationship, are closer friends than he imagined, although in his later life he really does miss Charles's company more than anything, despite knowing that spending time with Charles is not in his or anyone's best interest. This movie was a huge success and grossed over $313 million worldwide and won 4 Academy Awards. Following that success, Ron Howard worked on The Missing and then again with Russell Crowe and Cinderella Man, but the next movie that really caught my eye was The Davinci Code, which led to a trilogy of films based on the Langdon mystery thriller books that were written by Dan Brown. The film, like the book, was considered controversial. It was met with especially harsh criticism by the Catholic Church for the accusation that it is behind a 2,000-year-old cover-up concerning what the Holy Grail really is, the concept that Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene were married and that the union produced a daughter, as well as its treatment of the organization's Priory of Sion and Opus Dei. Many members urged to boycott the film. In the book, Dan Brown states that the Priory of Sion and all descriptions of artwork, architecture, documents, and secret rituals in this novel are accurate. For its sequel, director Ron Howard chose to treat Angels and Demons as a sequel to the previous film, rather than a prequel like the book, since many had read the novel after the Davinci Code. He liked the idea that Langdon had been through one adventure and become a more confident character. Howard was also more comfortable taking liberties in adapting the story because this novel was less popular than the Davinci Code. Producer Brian Grazer said that they were too reverential when adapting the Davinci Code, which resulted in it being a little long and stagey. This time, Langdon doesn't stop and give a speech. When he speaks, he's in motion. It's very much about modernity clashing with antiquity and technology versus faith, so these themes, these ideas are much more active, whereas the other one lived so much in the past. The tones are just innately so different between the two stories. For the third installment in the series, Inferno, Robert Langdon follows the trade of clues tied to Dante, the great medieval poet. When Langdon wakes up in an Italian hospital with amnesia, he teams up with Sienna Brooks, a doctor he hopes will help him recover his memories. Together they race across Europe and against the clock to stop a madman from unleashing a virus that could wipe out half of the world's population. This film, like the others, received negative or mixed reviews, but still did pretty good at the box office, grossing $220 million against a production budget of only $75 million. In between making the Langdon series of films, Ron Howard worked on Frost Nixon, which was released in 2008 and is a historical drama based on a 2006 play of the same name by Peter Morgan, who also adapted the screenplay. Both the film and the play take dramatic license with the on-air and behind-the-scenes details of the Nixon interviews. Jonathan Aiken, one of Nixon's official biographers who spent much time with the former president at La Casa Pacifica, rebukes the film for its portrayal of a drunken Nixon making a late-night phone call as never having happened. Ron Howard discusses the scene on his feature commentary for the DVD release, pointing out it was a deliberate act of dramatic license, and while Frost never received such a phone call, it was known that Richard Nixon during the Watergate scandal had occasionally made midnight phone calls that he couldn't very well recall the following day. Other inaccuracies include a misrepresentation of the end of the interviews, the failure to mention the fact that Nixon received 20% of the profits from the interviews, and many other things. At the end of the day, inaccuracies are to be expected with any historical events that are adapted to film. The next noteworthy project from Ron Howard was in 2011 with the movie Dilemma. This movie was Howard's first comedy film since he directed How the Grinch Stole Christmas in 2000. The film continues Vaughn's interest in tackling the dark areas of relationships following the breakup in 2006 and couples retreat in 2009. The Dilemma tells the story of Ronnie and Nick, who are best friends and partners in a small auto design firm. Ronnie is in a long-term relationship with his girlfriend Beth, while Nick is married to Geneva. The two have recently been given an opportunity to pitch an eco-friendly car to Doge. While at the botanical garden planning a way to propose marriage to Beth, Ronnie sees Geneva kissing a man named Zip. He comes home upset but lies to Beth about the reason, causing her to worry that the stress of work has caused a recurrence of Ronnie's gambling addiction. Ronnie makes up his mind to inform Nick about Geneva's infidelity, but puts it off after Nick expresses stress about their work. He meets with Geneva, who promises that the affair is over and that she will tell Nick as soon as the big project is finished. Ronnie subsequently discovers her and Zip continuing their relationship. Geneva then threatens to accuse Ronnie of hitting on her and tell Nick about a fling they had back in college. Ronnie follows Geneva to Zip's house and photographs the two of them together, but becomes trapped inside and misses his in-laws' anniversary party. Ronnie's increasingly erratic behavior leads his friends to think that he has begun gambling again. They hold an intervention for him, but Ronnie explains the truth behind his actions and Geneva admits to the affair. Later, Nick and Ronnie have their design accepted by Doge, and Ronnie proposes to Beth. Following this dark comedy, Ron Howard continued to work on big-budget movies such as Rush in 2013 and In the Heart of the Sea in 2015, including a couple of documentary films such as Made in America, Breakthrough, and The Beatles' 8 Days a Week, The Touring Years. His next big, or should I say huge, movie was actually directing a movie set in the Star Wars cinematic universe. That movie is Solo, a Star Wars story. Filming began on January 30th, 2017, and was actually directed by Phil Lord and Chris Miller, but on June 20th, 2017, citing creative differences, Lucasfilm announced that the original directors had left the project with a new director to be announced soon. What's interesting is that in the past, Howard had turned down an offer to direct Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Anyways, 2 days later, it was announced that Howard would take over directing for the remaining 3.5 weeks of scheduled principal photography, as well as the scheduled 5 weeks of reshoots. This movie follows young Han Solo, who finds adventure when he joins forces with a gang of galactic smugglers and a 190-year-old Wookiee named Chewbacca. Indebted to the gangster Dryden Voss, the crew devises a daring plan to travel to the mining plant Kessel to steal a batch of valuable coaxium. In need of a fast ship, Solo meets Lando Calrissian, the suave owner of the perfect vessel for the dangerous mission, the Millennium Falcon. Upon release in movie theaters, Solo grossed $393.2 million worldwide, making it the lowest grossing live-action Star Wars film and the first to be considered a box office bomb. Reviews were also kind of mixed, and even though I did appreciate the format, albeit very different than previous Star Wars episodes, I think that many people just had a hard time seeing someone other than Harrison Ford playing the part of Solo, and the fact that this was a straight-up adventure film without a lot of the elements that make Star Wars what it is. In 2020, Hillbilly Elegy was released, which was based on the 2016 memoir of the same name by J.D. Vance. The film opens in Jackson, Kentucky in 1997. An adult JD is looking back to his teenage years as he visits his family with his grandparents and mom, Bev, in their current home in Ohio. 14 years later, JD is attending Yale University, working 3 jobs to pay his tuition and dating a young woman named Osha. After getting a call from his sister, Lindsay, telling him that Bev has just been rushed to the hospital after overdosing on heroin, she asks JD to come home. This leads him to reflecting on 3 generations of family history and his own future. The film was criticized particularly for its screenplay and direction and received 3 nominations at the Golden Raspberry Awards: Worst Director for Howard, Worst Screenplay for Taylor, and Worst Supporting Actress for Close. However, the performances of some of the cast received praise, with Close receiving Supporting Actress nominations at the Academy Awards, the Golden Globe Awards, and Screen Actor Guild Awards. As of 2020, there are many future directed movies by Ron Howard that have been announced, including post-production on 13 Lives, which is a biographical survival drama film focused on the real events of a rescue mission that was assembled in Thailand, where a group of young boys and their soccer coach are trapped in a system of underground caves that are flooding. Well, that's it. This concludes the 3rd and final part on my Ron Howard retrospective. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Please be sure to subscribe and hit the like button. Also, be sure to check out the other two parts of this retrospective, as it looks back at the other decades of Ron Howard's directing, which includes some of the most iconic movies in 80s, 90s Hollywood cinema. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys in the next video.